Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Kimberly Olson, licensed clinical psychologist and marriage and family therapist, and we are on the last video regarding the relationship rescue. This is where we get to put everything together and you get to take all of that work that you've done and really create a change. So let's get started. If you are joining me for the first time and you want to participate in this, you probably want to go back to week 1 and start doing some of this work. Otherwise, this stuff is going to only make a limited amount of sense. So for those of you that have been working with me for a while, you should have your chart completed, okay, before you go on to the next step. And here's what we're going to do next. We've already done some comparisons and contrasts, but I just bring this up to remind you of how we look at the template or what we were raised with and how it became a pattern in our life. So, for example, the template, the demographics, again, safe middle class. And then, of course, this person grew up to live in a safe middle class neighborhood. Female authority figures with their mom, their experience was that she was very demeaning, always had to win, but she did have some creativity and recovery. We see this in patterns with female authority figures as this person tends to feel humiliated, overall loving and fair, but competitive and undermining. Okay, so this person has a multifaceted sort of relationship with women. The male authority figures, well, what we see is, if we scroll down, that this person felt loved by dad, but not protected. Okay. And that's the same sort of situation or pattern that we see in this woman's life. So her bosses, her male bosses, are overall kind, but can be passive and non-advocating. So there's the pattern, okay, non-advocating. With their peers, even as a child, they tended to have just 1 or 2 exclusive relationships. Um, and we see that in adulthood. So many acquaintances, but really just exclusivity, or the pattern is I just like to have one friend. The culture, the template was a belief in God. They were Caucasian, they were American. They see this reenacted in that God's still in the picture, even though that relationship is different, and they continue to be a part of the Caucasian American culture. In romance, the reason this is highlighted is that the first relationship was communicative, funny, unfaithful, lies, manipulation. Second, loyal and kind, service communication, both finding meaning at work and having issues with advocacy. Okay, so the reason that's a pattern, by the way, is that one reflects the relationship with mom, one reflects the relationship with dad. All right, so I know what you're thinking. You're going, Olson, yes, we know all this. So what are we going to do with this now? So I want you to take your chart and then create a list, okay, that indicates all of the patterns that have persisted in your life. So, for example, the middle class stayed married, safety, lack of trust with women, kind men who don't advocate, exclusive relationships or friendships, all eggs in one basket, a belief in God, and one relationship was like the relationship with mom, and the other was like the relationship with dad. So you're going to literally go down your chart and just make a very concrete list like this. Okay. And here are the questions that you want to ask. In this list, are there any patterns you would like to change? So take a minute and really contemplate that. You probably still want to be middle class or affluent, who knows? Staying married is probably a good thing. Living in a safe neighborhood is probably a good thing. Having a relationship with God's a good thing. Well, maybe one of the patterns you would like to change is to have to be less suspicious of women. That's a pattern that you would like to change. Maybe one of the patterns you'd like to change is to not expect advocacy from men. And maybe another is to have more than one friendship. Okay, so again, you don't want to exnate all of your patterns, because the truth is some of them are very good and some of them have served you well, but there's probably a couple in here that have caused you dysfunction. So you want to go back and change those patterns. Okay. So how do we do that? We'll get to that in a minute. So first I need you to identify which patterns do you want to change. Okay. So in this case, being less suspicious of women, not expecting advocacy from men. Okay. Because currently they do. Um, have more than one friendship because currently this person is one of those people that puts all their eggs in one basket. Okay, so we need to recognize what are the red flags that this pattern is starting again. Because remember, this all generally occurs on a very unconscious level. So feeling suspicious of women, it could be that this person feels anxious around women in authority. Could be that a red flag is feeling like you have to prove yourself. And what about expecting advocacy from men? Maybe one of the red flags is expecting a man to protect you instead of self-protection. Maybe another red flag is that you feel hurt over a lack of advocacy. Okay, so this has happened again. Having more than one friendship, well, a red flag would be not putting an effort into other friendships. Okay, so again, it's not an accident that we keep falling into these same types of relationships and the same types of patterns. So it starts with awareness. So stop the video and do this portion first. Okay, what are your red flags? How are you going to know that you're doing the same stuff, expecting different results? Okay, that's where the red flag part comes in. Two, well, actually, provisionally, which patterns would you like to change? Okay, keep what you like, get rid of the others. Okay, so now we're going to go on to eliciting maneuvers. But I want to show you or refresh your memory on how we identified that. Remember, eliciting maneuvers are the things that you do or I do that get others to fit this pattern or behave in a predictable way. So when we look at demographics, this person went to college, has 2 jobs, has a husband who's employed. That's going to predict a middle class to an upper middle class lifestyle. Both historically, the parents were married 50 years. Now this person's been married 22 years. So their eliciting maneuver is they're one of those people that plans to stay married. They don't let conflict and things like that create a sense of wanting to terminate that relationship. Okay. And what about with the female authority figures? Well, they recognize because they get anxious around women in authority because they're having to read them, that they might be defensive, afraid, might posture like they need to prove themselves. They might be hypervigilant to invalidation, have feelings of helplessness or dismayed or arrogant or defensive. Okay. And male authority figures, of course, they're always given the benefit of the doubt. Okay. Aim to please, and they expect loyalty and advocacy, which again, by the way, was perfectly appropriate in this person's relationship with their dad, but may or may not be appropriate in their relationship with other men. Okay. Ignore or rationalize invalidating behavior or assume it's their fault. Okay. With peers, again, they don't give much, just 1 or 2 friendships, okay, and they have high expectations. In their culture, they tend to, again, be neglectful in spiritual matters unless they're desperate. And they have an assumption that some rejection about being rejected based on their ethnicity. Okay. So one of their eliciting maneuvers really has to do with their pathogenic belief or their assumptions. In romance, they tolerated unacceptable behavior because they were desperate and felt devalued. And in the second relationship, ignored problems. Okay. And with the adult children, very loving, but very distant, struggle with genuineness. So let's go back to our themes, our worksheet, what we're doing. Okay. Now, I want you to use your chart to write down your eliciting maneuvers. Okay, and they come right from your chart. You're just going to be much more succinct about it. Hardworking, okay, expects to be married for a lifetime, or conflicts are not seen as grounds for divorce. With women, they tend to be distrusting, guilty until proven innocent, and feel compelled to prove themselves. Which, by the way, again, when we talk about eliciting maneuvers, how we get people to behave in a predictable way, if you're defensive, if you're trying to prove yourself, if you come off as haughty and arrogant, of course, women in authority are going to feel defensive or not feel comfortable with you as well. Men, assuming benevolence and that problems are my fault, not confronting a lack of advocacy. Okay? Because they, again, sort of rationalize everything that male authority figures do as being a result of them either being unworthy or they've done something wrong, just like they internalize that in their childhood. Friends, only one, little time devoted to friendships. Okay, so how do you keep exclusivity and only having one friend? Only devote time to the one friendship. Culture, only going to God in crisis. So of course, again, that relationship is probably not going to be deeply gratifying because it's all based on crisis situations and not an ongoing relationship. This person tends to take racial issues personally, as opposed to considering that the way somebody is confronting a situation is probably due to pain from their own past. Children won't confront their children, and there's a lack of genuineness. So of course, that relationship is superficial and not close. So what are you going to do with these eliciting maneuvers? Questions. First, how do your eliciting maneuvers continue to create the same conflicted relationship patterns? Right? So as we discussed earlier, so being defensive elicits defensiveness. So you may have somebody who isn't normally a woman who isn't normally defensive, but is very benevolent towards other women. But if you come in because of your anxiety and then all of a sudden have to sell yourself, she's going to respond to that, right? And so in that way, you predict your own outcome. Okay? And how about with men? It could be that, again, just that assumption. So assume that you must advocate for me. Which again, hey, you know what, in some relationships that's appropriate, probably from your husband. And it certainly was from the father, but may or may not be from your boss, not clear. And not confronting the lack of advocacy predicts that it's going to happen again. Okay, because it could be that the man's unaware that it's going on, or is just sort of relieved that you're not being a buster about it. Okay. And like we said with the friendships, well, we know this because again, not putting effort into relationships creates that same thing over and over again. So what behavior do I need to do in order to change this pattern or stop it? So I know that a red flag is if I'm meeting a female authority figure, I might sense anxiety, right? So in this person's case, maybe what you can do is some grounding when you feel anxiety around female authority. It might be a good time to challenge your thoughts. Okay, so now that you're aware of what your thoughts are and how they're impacting your behavior, if you know you're going in to meet a female authority figure, you know that you're anxious, okay, and you know that this anxiety makes you act like an ass, okay, or evocative. You know this now. So before walking in, maybe do some grounding activities so your anxiety goes down, and then challenge your thoughts. So walking in, I'm not going to feel like I need to sell myself to this person, or I'm simply not going to sell myself to this person. And what about with men? What in your behavior do you need to change? Okay, so if it is that I assume that you must advocate for me, I need to advocate for myself. And if somebody who I think should be advocating for me but isn't, I need to confront the lack of advocacy instead of assuming it's my fault. Okay. And then obviously with friends, as we said before, you're going to put, I don't know, maybe make 2 phone calls per week to different friends. I mean, that would be a straightforward behavior that's going to enhance your friendships, because at least you'll go from 1 to 2, right? That's a good place to start. With the culture, it could be that what you're needing to do is, I don't know, spend 5 minutes a day. Sorry about the interruption, by the way. Nurturing a relationship with God in some form. That'll stop the pattern of just going to Him when you're feeling desperate. Okay. And with children, okay, confronting painful feelings. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to go put somebody on blast, but it means that this lack of genuineness and not talking to each other is perpetuating the cycle of isolation. So these are the behaviors that you're going to need to change in order to stop this pattern. So what exactly will you do when confronted with a situation that triggers your eliciting maneuvers? This is your commitment part. So think of part 2 or question 2 as your brainstorming. Part 3, think of it as your commitment. So if all you're willing to do in that moment is, I don't know, grounding when you're anxious, that's fine. But you've got to make some sort of commitment, because behavioral change, they don't change by themselves. Okay. But what's kind of cool is that it only really takes one hiccup in the cycle, in the system, for things to be different. Okay. All right. So now what about our beliefs? First of all, stop and do that portion first. All right, so let's look at pathogenic beliefs once you've finished with that. Oops, let's try that again. Okay, so we know where our pathogenic beliefs come from, that they come from our patterns and experiences, and of course our eliciting maneuvers that make the same thing keep happening over and over again. So if I don't work, you don't have value, could be a pathogenic belief. You must stay married, you must live close to family, even if conflicted. So remember, your core beliefs are this: if these things are true, then what does it say about me? So if I have to work in order to be of value, then that must mean I'm not very lovable. Okay. What about with female authority? Female authority are not trustworthy. Okay. If you're successful, they will bury you. You feel helpless, and you tend to dichotomize women. So they're either the perfect mother or monster. With female authority figures, if that's true, okay, if your own mother rejects you or pulls away from you when you're successful, then a core belief you could have developed about yourself is that you don't deserve success. Okay. With male authority, if you hurt me, it's my fault. That's the pathogenic belief. You will not protect me. You will betray me despite my loyalty. So if that's true, because we really have to take this back to history, and your dad doesn't protect and advocate for you, what does that mean about you? So I am unworthy of being protected. I'm unworthy of loyalty. With peers, if your pathogenic belief is that they're just going to take, and betray you, then your core belief must be that you don't have a whole lot of value as a friend if you don't have these things to give. With culture, okay, invest the minimum amount for survival and favor. Okay. Other cultures are not seeking equality, but superiority and payback. Okay. If that is true, okay, I'm unimportant and I'm unworthy. Or it could even be at your core belief that you believe that you are less than people from other cultures. Okay, with romance, men will pursue you until they get what they want, then you will be devalued. Men can take care of themselves and don't need a lot of attention. So if that's true, what does that say about me? That I'm expendable? And if I don't need to pay a whole lot of attention to the man in my life, he must be unimportant. And then children, if this is your pathogenic belief, my child is very fragile physically and psychologically and cannot withstand confrontation. She will reject me or yell at me if I discuss these feelings. What does that say about me if I can't even talk to my own kid? I'm a failure. I'm a bad mother. So let's go ahead and apply that to the homework that we're doing. Let's bring this up. Your pathogenic beliefs. So you're going to go back and go to your chart and write down what your pathogenic beliefs are. And here's what we're going to do. For each pathogenic belief, we're going to provide an alternative explanation or rational response. You don't have to believe it, by the way. Okay. It's just that most of us have enough sense to at least know that there are other perspectives or other explanations, but you don't have to believe that. So if one of your pathogenic beliefs was, if you don't work, you don't have value. Okay. Then down here, if you don't work, you may contribute in other valuable ways. Okay. So you don't have to believe it. You just need to be able to cognitively be able to do that. Okay. If one of your pathogenic beliefs are that women are untrustworthy and will hurt you, an alternative explanation could be that some women are untrustworthy, but most are not. Number 3, men will not advocate for you, and it's your fault. A lack of advocacy is a sign of their weakness, not my worth. Advocate for yourself. So let's look at number 4. People will use you, so don't invest in friendships. So some people will use you, but not all. Friendships are worth the investment. Okay, again, you don't have to believe this yet. Okay, that's not part of your job yet. You just got to be able to think outside the box. 5, God isn't important unless I'm in trouble. Okay, God is always important. 6, other cultures want superiority, not equality. So other cultures sometimes react to hurt with jokes and comments. Now, notice just that challenging of that pathogenic belief, how that changes everything. So if this person's pathogenic belief is that other cultures are always taking shots at their culture because they really want to be superior. They don't really want equality. Well, if you just change that thought and look at an alternative explanation, like other cultures react to hurt with jokes and comments, it's a completely different framework. Number 7, men will love you and leave you. Not all men leave. In this person's case, hubby has been with you for 22 years. And 8, men don't need a lot of attention. Men have the same needs you do. My child is fragile, so I can't confront her. My child is stronger, and I think the relationship is worth trying for. Okay. So again, don't have to believe them yet. You just need to be able to recognize that alternative explanations might exist. So what I would want you to do with this is practice this every day for a week, okay? You're going to look at your pathogenic beliefs, okay? Look at your alternative explanations and ask yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you believe in this? So for example, if you don't work, you don't have value. Maybe today you believe that out of 10. Women are untrustworthy and will hurt you. Maybe today you believe that at an 8. Men will not advocate for you and it's your fault. Maybe you only believe that at a 6. People will use you, so don't trust or don't invest in friendships. Maybe 7. God is unimportant unless I'm in trouble. Maybe you really don't believe that at all. Other cultures want superiority, not equality. Maybe that's a 5. Men will love you and leave you. Maybe that's a 4. Men don't need a lot of attention. Maybe you only believe that out of 4. My child is fragile, so I can't confront her. Maybe that's a big one. Okay? So that's where you believe today. So let's go down to your rational responses. If you don't work, you may contribute in other valuable ways. To what extent do you believe that? Maybe today it's at an 8. Some women are untrustworthy, but most are not. Maybe you believe that at a 7. A lack of advocacy for me is a sign of their weakness, not my worth. Advocate for yourself. Maybe I only believe that at a 4. Some people will use you, but not all. Friendships are worth the investment. So maybe a 5. God is always important. Maybe an 8 on that one. Other cultures sometimes react or hurt with jokes and comments. Maybe that's an 8. Not all men leave. Hubby hasn't left, so you probably believe that out of 10. Men have the same needs you do. Maybe you only believe that at a 7. My child is stronger than I think, and the relationship is worth trying for. So this is actually probably 2 things. Maybe you only believe that at a 2, but you believe the relationship is worth fighting for at a 10. Okay. So now, tomorrow, where do you rate this? Okay, so chances are these pathogenic beliefs are going to decrease and your beliefs in the alternative explanations are going to go up. But again, this is going to take effort. Okay, it didn't take you a day to come to believe these things. It's going to take you some time to not believe these things or not to lead with these beliefs. And there's a couple of things that you can do on top of it. When you notice these pathogenic beliefs popping up, okay, you can say something like stop or cancel, and then provide the alternative belief. Okay, so for example, I meet a new female authority figure and my pathogenic belief comes up, women are untrustworthy and will hurt you. I can say stop. Some women will hurt you, but most women are trustworthy. Okay, and that's an old Aaron Beck thought stopping technique. Okay, and the cancel thing that came from Jack Canfield and the Chicken Soup Guy. All right. So what about these stinker core beliefs? Because at the end of the day, it's what really moves us. So, number 1, I am not lovable enough to be taken care of. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you believe that? You don't deserve success. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you believe that? I am unworthy of protection. Maybe that's a big one. I'm unworthy of loyalty. I'm unimportant. Maybe you've already done a little bit of cognitive work on yourself. I'm expendable. I'm a failure. Maybe you don't believe that one a whole lot. I'm a bad mother. Maybe that's a big gun right now. Okay, so again, for each of these, we're going to provide an alternative explanation or rational response. So I am not lovable enough to be taken care of. You are lovable even if someone is incapable of taking care of you. 2, you don't deserve success. You deserve success despite others feeling threatened by it. 3, I'm unworthy of protection. You are worthy of protection. 4, I'm unworthy of loyalty. So I am worthy of loyalty. So you get the point, and you're going to go through and rate how much you believe these today. So do you really believe you're lovable, even if someone is incapable for caring for you? I don't know, maybe I believe that out of 5. Maybe you believe, how much do you believe you deserve success despite others feeling threatened? That might be really low, because again, making others feel threatened may produce a lot of shame inside of you. You are worthy of protection, even if others can't provide it. Maybe you pretty much believe that out of 10. I am worthy of loyalty, even if someone isn't loyal to me. And you may believe that out of 10. So you go through with all 8 of those, okay? And again, you want to work on this for at least a good week and ask yourself, to what degree do you believe this tomorrow? So maybe tomorrow you believe this less. Maybe tomorrow you believe this more, okay? So the key, of course, is awareness and intervention. And these are things that you have to do deliberately, okay? Again, you can't expect to do this for one day and all will be well. In fact, really your goal for today is to be mindful, okay? So I want you to go back and be mindful of when you see these patterns emerging, okay? And then be able to explore the ways in which you agreed to intervene on that pattern, so that pattern stops, okay? And again, it only takes a little change of behavior to put a kink in the chain. It disrupts the whole thing. It's the whole butterfly effect, right? So even if, again, you walk in and you meet a woman in authority and you feel anxious, if all you do is ground, okay? That's one step. And of course, our pathogenic beliefs and core beliefs are what really moves us. And sometimes we don't ever challenge those because it hasn't occurred to us to challenge those. Okay, we assume that the beliefs that we were raised with were right. Okay, when in fact that may not be the case. We assume that the explanations we were provided are correct when that may not be the case. So I want to take you to one more thing, because I know, as well as I know myself, that the reason that some of you watched this series at all was because you want to fix somebody in your life. And this whole idea of focusing on yourself maybe wasn't real attractive to you to begin with, okay? So I want to give you a leg up and give you some of what you probably want, okay? So let's say, for example, okay, you and your significant other argue all the time. And when you argue, he goes to the garage. Okay. And you call your friends. And the issue is not discussed. Okay. Well, you can look at, first of all, what beliefs are formed about your relationship based on this pattern. So maybe one of those beliefs is that we can't resolve any of our issues. Okay. Because you never do, because when you guys argue, he goes to the garage and you call your friends and the issue is never discussed. So maybe we can't resolve our issues. Okay. But we have eliciting maneuvers going on right here, which is he isolates. You turn to people other than your spouse. And these things predict that you won't resolve your issues. So what is your core belief? Well, it could be that I'm unimportant. Goodness sakes. I am not important enough to resolve issues with. Okay. So maybe you're not fighting or advocating to really go in and work on those issues. Okay. Now, if we go back to you guys' templates, chances are one or both of your parents were conflict avoidant. Okay. So you can totally see how this works. And again, you don't necessarily have to have all of the information to use this. And you're going to do this exactly like you did your own chart, except you're doing it relationally. Now, how cool would it be if you and your husband did this together, or you and your wife or significant other did this together? Because you can find out these things about yourselves, and it's really non-threatening because we're not accusing anybody of anything. Maybe your significant other is very nice, then explosive. Okay, and this happened, I don't know, on the honeymoon. This happened, I don't know, 3 weeks ago and yesterday. Okay. An eliciting maneuver could be that spouse suppresses emotions, then explodes. Okay. So when you think about it, anybody who suppresses their emotions, they don't just like leave the building. Okay, they're being built up somewhere, and it's a setup for explosion. Okay, and maybe it was the case that you didn't set boundaries the first time it happened, or you blame yourself. And again, I want to be careful. I'm not talking about victim blaming here. I'm talking about behavior that predicts that it's going to happen again. Okay. So your pathogenic belief could be that all men or women have bad tempers. And maybe you believe that this is normal in marriage. Okay, so if your belief is that all men and women have bad tempers and lash out at their spouse, what does that say about you? Okay. Not worthy of being treated with respect. Okay. And again, if you go back into you and your significant other's childhood, you tend to be one parent, you marry the other. So maybe his dad is explosive, you know, and the mom is very passive, and vice versa. Okay, let me provide one more example. Okay, so let's say that your husband doesn't get along with anyone in your family. Okay, and the pattern is he rejects your brother. He won't attend holidays. He rejects my assertiveness. Others. So we'll start there. So he may in fact, feel rejected. But let's look at what he does to elicit these responses. Okay, maybe he's a know-it-all. Maybe he's very arrogant. Thinks he knows more than everyone. and won't back down. Okay. This is going to ultimately trigger rejection. Okay. And when we look at somebody's pathogenic beliefs that always has to be right and is rejecting of everyone, okay, I must be right. If you don't agree with me, you are against me. Or you are, fill in the blank. If they're very arrogant, they might think everybody's stupid that doesn't agree with them. And what's behind the core of that, generally speaking, is a belief that you're with me or you're against me. And how this person was raised was likely that it was very shameful to be wrong. Okay. That there was only one right opinion. And if you don't agree with me, again, you're against me. Okay. And again, this comes from a place of shame. Could be I'm unlovable. It could be, this actually goes over here. I will reject you before you reject me. Okay. Must be right to be loved. Okay, and so when you go back in this person's childhood, you're probably going to see a great deal of rejection. All right, because rejection elicits defensiveness. Okay, if you were rejected by your own parents, what does that tell you about your self-worth? Okay, and so there becomes this issue that I'm never going to let anybody get close enough to me again. So I'm going to reject you before you reject me. Okay? And the way that I reject you is that I'm a know-it-all, that I'm arrogant, and that I think I know more than anybody, and I won't back down and respect your boundaries. Okay? But behind that is this belief that I must be right to be loved, right? You were either right or you were rejected. If you don't agree with me, you are against me. So if you believe that someone is against you, if they disagree with you, okay, it becomes a much more powerful argument. And behind that belief, think about where it comes from, is this belief that I'm not lovable. So what do you do with this? My hope is that you as a couple will explore this together. Okay, but if you can't, what you absolutely can do is put a kink in the chain. Okay, so let's go up here. You see the pattern, okay? He goes into the garage, he isolates when you argue, and you call your friends. So what are you going to do different next time? So maybe you're going to say, you know what, sweetheart, why don't you take 10 minutes in the garage to cool off? Then think we need to sit down and talk about it. Maybe you might want to pick up the rules of fair fighting or something like that. So it's not, emotionally laden without any outcome. Okay, if you're going to have emotion, and I believe in emotion, there should be a good outcome to it, right? It should be purposeful. So you can interrupt this entire cycle, okay? And you can begin to challenge your beliefs about resolving your issues, because you obviously can, you just haven't. So you could even go up here and change this as you're challenging your beliefs to, I won't resolve my issues. Okay? Because that's what you and your husband are doing right there, is that you're refusing to talk about it. He isolates, you turn to other people, both of which are a recipe for absolute garbage when it comes to conflict resolution. Okay, what about this explosive dad? Mom is very passive. Okay, so very nice then explosive. So maybe you can work with your spouse, if they're open and willing, to getting out their anger in little ways, right? I always think of the pressure cooker. If you let out a little pressure at a time, you're much less likely to explode. Now, that doesn't make you responsible for their anger or their reactions. It's just something to consider. And also, darling, what are your boundaries? What are you willing to accept and what aren't you willing to accept? Okay. That might be the thing that you need to do. Okay. And to assert yourself in that capacity. Okay. And not to blame yourself. Right. Because his explosive nature has nothing really to do with you. It has to do with the fact that he or she, okay, many women are this way too. That's how they learn to express their emotions. Okay. And you are worthy of being treated with respect. And then finally, if you know that your significant other responds strongly to rejection, okay, how do you affirm them? You recognize that in a moment of insecurity, he or she is going to challenge everything that everybody else says in their surroundings, right? Because they're feeling really insecure. So they're going to get really challenging. Maybe that's a really good time to say something to your wife, if it's your wife that's doing this, like, you know what, the way that you take care of our family is amazing. I am always so impressed with you. Or if it's a guy, it could be parenting, but it could be, my goodness, it really seems that you know a lot about, I don't know, vaccines. I'm very impressed with your knowledge. Okay. You shut it down is what's happening there, right? Instead of getting engaged in a tinkle contest, you shut it down. Okay. So you have all these things that you can do with this chart. And it comes from knowing yourself and knowing a little something about your spouse. Okay. And I think it's honestly, one of the most invaluable gifts you can give to people, because again, we spend so much time invested in relationships, but very little time learning about the components of relationships are what genuinely moves you. So I want to thank you for going on this journey with me again. If you have any questions, put it in the comment section. It's truly been an honor and a pleasure, and I will continue making videos surrounding this topic, certainly not as lengthy. I just wanted to give you the workshop version first. Thanks.